story of Jesus that has always puzzled the world. A silence so long, so deep, that it almost feels intentional. We see him as a baby in Bethlehem. We see him again at 12 years old, standing in the temple, speaking with a wisdom that stunned the scholars of Jerusalem. And then, everything goes quiet. For nearly 18 years, the Gospels say nothing. It is as if history folds itself shut, as if the story of the most important life to ever walk the earth suddenly disappears. But what if that silence was never universal? What if somewhere on this earth, far from Rome, far from Europe, far from the councils that shaped the Western Bible, the story continued? Before we go deeper, kindly remember to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more discoveries like this. Now, let's travel into a land where ancient Christianity survived untouched, where manuscripts older than empires still whisper what the world forgot. Ethiopia is unlike any nation on earth. Christianity reached it early, centuries before much of Europe, and it never left. The mountains hold monasteries carved from stone. Priests still chant in Ge'ez, the ancient language of kings, and in these monasteries, monks preserved scriptures the outside world never knew existed. Here, the Bible is not only a book, it is a library, a world, a treasury of ancient writings, many kept alive long after other nations rejected them. And within this treasury lies a text that speaks directly into the missing years of Jesus. It is known in scholarship as the Ethiopic Infancy Gospel of Thomas, a Ge'ez version of one of the earliest Christian childhood traditions of Jesus. In the West, this text was pushed aside. In Ethiopia, it was cherished, copied, sung, read, and preserved for centuries. And what it says will leave you breathless. According to the Ethiopian manuscripts, Jesus' childhood was not silent at all. From a very young age, his divinity shone through in ways no one could ignore. One of the most famous stories describes a moment beneath the warm sun of Nazareth. Young Jesus kneels in the dust, shaping small birds out of clay. Children gather around him, laughing softly, watching him work. Then something impossible happens. The boy lifts his hands. He breathes a quiet word, and the clay begins to tremble. Those tiny clay sparrows stretch their wings, real wings, soft and feathered. Their bodies shimmer alive in the light. Then, with a single breath of wind, they burst into the sky, chirping as they rise above the rooftops. The children stare in shock. Some scream, some fall to the ground. But Jesus simply watches them with calm eyes, as if this was completely natural, as if creation itself responds to him without question. This scene, beautiful, gentle, and mysterious, is preserved in the Ethiopic infancy gospel tradition, and Ethiopia kept it safe for centuries. One of the most fascinating moments is when Jesus goes to school. The teacher, ZACCHAEUS, tries to teach him the alphabet, but Jesus already knows more than any teacher on earth. The Ethiopic text says, "When the master taught him the letter Aleph, the child opened his mouth and spoke of its strokes and lines and of the hidden things within it, until the teacher fell silent." The teacher cannot understand how a small boy knows things even scholars don't. In the story, ZACCHAEUS cries out, "This child is not human, for no mortal speaks such wisdom." The purpose of the scene is not to shame the teacher, it is to show a great reversal. The one meant to teach becomes the one taught. In Ethiopia's tradition, this reminds readers that Jesus' wisdom is not learned, it is part of who he is. Another cherished Ethiopian story describes a day when Joseph, working with wood and stone, injures his hand badly. The pain is sharp, the wound is deep. There is fear in Mary's eyes, Young Jesus walks over quietly. No drama, no crowd, only compassion. He places his small hand on the injured flesh, and instantly, the pain disappears. The wound closes. The skin becomes whole, as if nothing ever happened. Mary watches in silence. Joseph trembles. Because for them, this is not just a child. This is the one who carries the breath of God. This gentle miracle is also preserved in Ethiopian tradition, held like a precious memory that the rest of the world never received. Ethiopian Christianity preserves even deeper memories of Jesus' early years, especially the family's time in Egypt. The manuscripts and oral traditions describe a journey surrounded by divine protection. When danger approached, it vanished. Wild animals grew calm at his presence. Thieves turned away as if something unseen stopped them. Paths opened. Nights glowed with a strange peace. It is as though the very earth recognized him and adjusted itself to honor him. In these traditions, the young Jesus does not become the Messiah at adulthood. He was the Messiah even in innocence. The Western Church, caught in debates, councils, and theological arguments, trimmed away many early Christian writings. They feared exaggeration. They feared confusion. They desired order and clarity. And in that process, stories of Jesus' youth faded from their world. But Ethiopia was different. Isolated in its mountains, protected from Rome and Byzantium, guided by its own ancient line of Christian kings and monks, Ethiopia kept copying these manuscripts in Ge'ez, kept reading them, kept passing them from one generation to the next. So while the Western world grew comfortable with silence, Ethiopia kept the early whispers alive. When you read the Ethiopian infancy traditions, something becomes clear. Jesus' divinity was not something that appeared suddenly at age 30. It was always there, quiet, gentle, powerful, shining through the hands of a child who healed, who restored, who created, who carried heaven in his breath. These stories do not replace the Gospels. They do not compete with them. They illuminate them. They show us a Jesus who was extraordinary from the beginning. A Jesus whose childhood was a living prophecy. A Jesus who walked through the world with wonder surrounding him like a garment. Imagine for a moment the history we would have lost if Ethiopia had not guarded these manuscripts. Imagine shelves of ancient parchment hidden in mountain monasteries, copper lamps glowing beside scribes as they copied ancient stories, voices carrying across centuries through ink and devotion. Ethiopia preserved a world the rest of Christianity allowed to vanish. A world where Jesus' missing years are not empty, not silent, not forgotten. A world where his childhood shines with divine beauty. So what does Ethiopia's Bible tell us? It tells us that the most mysterious years of Jesus' life were not lost. They were preserved patiently, quietly, faithfully, by a Christian community older than empires, older than cathedrals, older than the very structures that shaped the Western world. It tells us that the child who became the Savior was always extraordinary, always divine, always walking with heaven open above him. And it reminds us that sometimes the greatest truths survive only because someone, somewhere, loved them enough to protect them. What do you think? Does this Ethiopian account give you a new picture of Jesus, one filled with wonder, gentleness, and holy power? If it moved you, don't forget to subscribe. There are many more hidden stories waiting to be uncovered.